Thank you all for being here today at the WP studio. I'm Cat Zakrzewski, and I'm a White House reporter here at the Washington Post. And my guest today is Michael Kratsios, the director of the Office of Science and Tech Policy at the White House. And he also has worked in the tech industry when he has not been in government, including for venture capitalist Peter Thiel and Scale AI. Michael, thanks so much for being with us here in Davos today.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
And so we are here today. It's hard to believe because so much has happened, but on the 1 year anniversary of Trump's inauguration. And I wanted to take a minute to give you a second to reflect on what have you learned about AI and government in this past year?
Well, this past year has been one of the most dramatic accelerations of the prioritization of technology in the history of American government. I started my time working in government in Trump 45 and in the first term where I served as the CTO of the United States. And at that time, the president was interested in AI. He signed the first executive order ever in the history of the United States on AI in February of 2019. But technology was always kind of a tier 2 issue. It was something that was important, but it wasn't something that was on the front page of every newspaper. It was important for the economy, but it wasn't driving the stock market. It was important generally for relationships with foreign countries, but it wasn't the primary driver of a lot of these international deals that we're doing. You fast forward only short 4 years, and it is the story, no matter what you're working on. If you're working on energy, if you're working on international relations, if you're working on national security, and this past year has manifested itself across so many different portfolios. I think the key action, I think probably most important, if you had to name one that the administration took in 2025, was all around the AI action plan. This was the plan the United States has to win the AI race that was released in July of last year. It lays out sort of three pillars of the strategy. One is about innovation. How does the U.S. continue to out-innovate and make sure that the next great AI discoveries are made in the United States? The second is all about infrastructure and energy. How do we power the AI revolution that we need here in America? And the third pillar is all about international engagement. How do we work with our partners and allies to make sure that the whole world is running on American stack? So I think to me, it's really, back to your question, it's about this prioritization of technology and its manifestation in so many different pieces of the policy puzzle.
And on that point, I want to come back to the AI action plan, but you mentioned just how this is so on the front page of newspapers, which good for me. But I wanted to ask you a little bit about just the role the tech companies are playing, because it's quite different this time around. You saw a lot of the companies kind of keep the first Trump administration at arm's length, and now they're constantly in the Oval Office. How has that changed your job?
Well, I think companies are just one set of stakeholders that we have to deal with when we're trying to deliver results for American people. And obviously they have their interests and are doing an incredible job in developing new technologies, of commercializing those technologies, on exporting those technologies. We've talked about a lot in the past about research and development in the United States. The private sector now, outspends the federal government on basic research and development by 7-3, so 70% of basic R&D is by the private sector. So they play a very critical role in our larger innovation ecosystem. So I think it's natural that we have to hear from them as one of many constituents that we work with every day.
And that kind of relationship, though, has raised some concerns about conflicts of interest with this administration. What's your response to people who are worried about the closeness between some of the officials in the administration and the CEOs in industry?
Yeah, I'm not particularly familiar with that, but I think, as I said earlier, I think the key thing is we try to work with all constituents across the country, whether it be corporations, whether it be civil society, whether it be academia. And I think for us, having relationships with all those pieces of the puzzle allow us to make the best policy decisions for the country.
And recently, there was an AI executive order around state AI laws that made a lot of headlines. And I wanted to ask you, part of that executive order directs your office and others to work on a national framework for AI policy with Congress. Can you give us a status update on that and what you expect next?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, zooming out a bit for those of you who aren't too familiar, I think this is born out of this larger policy question in the United States about whether or not a patchwork of state regulations around AI is a good or bad thing for the country. The president spoke about this particular issue when he gave his speech in July when we released the AI action plan. And the general position he took and the position of the administration is that creating a patchwork where there's 50 different rules around AI is actually a real challenge or challenge for innovators and borderline sort of anti-innovation. And I think the thing that ultimately happens with this patchwork is the people that suffer the most are usually the smallest technology companies, or the ones that don't have armies of lawyers to find ways to navigate and make sure that they're complying with 50 different sets of rules. So the president directed me and David Sachs to work on a legislative proposal to create a sensible national framework for the United States. So that's what we're going to be doing in earnest for the next few months, and hopefully we'll have something to share in the near future.
And a lot of states, though, look at what's happening in Washington, and their argument for moving forward with their own laws is there's nothing on the books yet, and so we can act more quickly, and we will. I mean, why should they wait for Washington to pass legislation, given the gridlock we've seen in Congress?
Well, I think there's a couple of things to think about. I don't necessarily buy the argument that there isn't anything on the books. A position that the Trump administration has taken since the first go around in 45 is that when you regulate AI, you should think about it as a use case and sector-specific regulatory regime. And what we mean by that is having one individual AI law that covers everything related to AI is not feasible, and it doesn't actually work. The Europeans attempted this with the EU AI Act, and it's been an abysmal failure. And the way that I like to think about it is that AI is going to be everywhere, and it is everywhere. It's in medical diagnostics, it's in drones, it's in self-driving vehicles, it's in financial services. And the way that you regulate those is through the existing regulatory mechanisms that the federal government already has to regulate AI-powered medical diagnostics, to regulate drones, to regulate self-driving cars. And in this way, you actually have regulators that understand the industry that is being impacted by AI and create regulations and update regulations to a world that AI exists. So to me, I kind of push back against the fact that there isn't regulations, actually quite a bit. And if anything, we need to look at it to make sure we can at some points kind of accelerate places where AI can be deployed. But I think there is a balance to be struck, and the president was very clear in his executive orders that there are places where the states should continue to look at regulations, things related to child safety, things related to the deployment of data centers and energy, and you wouldn't want to mess with that. So there are places certainly for the states to play.
And the order also directs the administration, though, to sue states over laws in certain other areas. And I just wanted to get a sense, how do you square the need that you just mentioned to have national consistency with the rights of states to make their own rules?
Yeah, I think the answer is the same that I said. I think the president made clear in his executive order that there are specific areas where states should continue to legislate, and we'd love to see that. And in places where we believe a sensible national framework makes sense, we'll hopefully draft something that can pass in Congress.
And I want to move on now to data centers, because this is an issue that we saw in some of the governor's races last year, was really top of mind for voters who are really worried about rising energy costs and their own utility bills. And I just wanted to get a sense of what your administration is doing to ensure energy remains affordable while simultaneously pushing these data center build-outs.
Yeah, so I would say two things. I mean, I don't think you have to be sort of a politico that tracks the news to know that there's been no president more obsessed with energy abundance than President Trump. So everything that we possibly can do to drive energy production in the United States and affordability is being done, from permitting to licensing of different energy sources and so on. But I think the second piece, which is specific to the AI question, is around this idea of when a data center is being built, how do you ensure that the data center itself and the power that it uses doesn't ultimately result in ratepayers or regular Americans having increased electricity bills? And the truth is, the president has been very clear on this fact. He actually did a truth on this on Monday, which I'm sure you've seen, which he essentially said that if you are a data center, you should be paying your own way. You should pay for all the electricity that you will be consuming for your data center. You should pay for the production of that new electricity. You should pay for any new transmission lines that you you are going to be creating in order to hook up that. And ultimately, I think as an administration, we're committed to ensuring that these data centers are not actually raising the rates of individual ratepayers. And layered on top of that is we've actually seen a lot of tech companies come out and make that pledge and make that promise. Microsoft just last week said that themselves, and I think many others are doing the same thing.
And on that point, though, can you trust these companies to make voluntary pledges, just given the history that we've seen in this industry? Or do we need laws on the books that would require that?
I don't want to speak for the companies, but I will say they are highly incentivized to do the right thing here. At the end of the day, the primary bottleneck to the build out of these data centers in the United States is not federal laws or regulation. It is local zoning. And the challenge that they face, if you ask any of them today, the biggest challenge that these large data center builders face is local issues. It's whether or not they will get the permit at the local level to be able to build. So they need to make sure that they can convince these local communities that the rates aren't going to go up and or else they won't be able to actually build.
And on the topic of kind of voters' concerns about artificial intelligence, we see that job loss is a big fear for people. There was a Reuters poll last year that found 71% of respondents are concerned that AI will put too many people out of work permanently. What do you say to those people who are worried about the impact this is going to have on their jobs?
I would say that this administration is deeply committed to driving programs forward that can help retrain, reskill, and prepare America's workers for the AI economy of the future. There's large programs underway in the Secretary of Labor has driven to Labor Department, Department of Education, all for these reskilling programs and upskilling of Americans. So if transitions do happen, there are places where you can actually get the skills that you need to get a job that can work in the 21st century. I think the other thing that we think a lot about is how do we prepare young Americans for an AI future? And it's something that the White House has been very fixated on. The First Lady has been very active on this. And this is K through 12 education on AI and helping students in America understand where AI works really well, where it doesn't work, where you should use it, where you shouldn't use it. And the whole point is not necessarily to teach young Americans how to use this tool, but to make them understand the technology, to demystify it, so that they can be ready for their job when they enter the workforce. And kind of the last piece, which I think is worth noting, is that what excites me about this AI future is there's going to be a whole set of jobs that are created which we have never heard of, haven't imagined, haven't thought of. And those are all jobs that are going to be filled by great American workers. And I'm excited for that future. And it's something that we as an economy have been able to transition through for many decades.
Going back to that reskilling program that you just mentioned with the Department of Labor, that was a key prong of the AI action plan. Can you tell us exactly what that program would look like and where the funding for it is coming from?
Yeah, I think the funding is coming from the Department of Labor. So that's been appropriated funding for reskilling that they're using. And these are grant-related programs where folks that have reskilling opportunities can apply for grants that are then funded by Department of Labor that are then executed. And what's great about what the Department of Labor also does is they have strong partnerships with a lot of private sector companies that are also they themselves committed to this sort of retraining and reskilling initiative. So you can almost get sort of a 1 + 1 = 3 on that equation.
Are there any specific companies that are already doing this that you think show how this could work in the future?
I would have to check with the Department of Labor and see what they think, but that's not something I know at the moment.
Got it. And we are exactly a year away from the launch of DeepSeek, which really intensified the debate over how the U.S. frontier models are stacking up against those in China. I mean, what's your assessment of where we're at today in terms of that competition?
Yeah, I think the DeepSeek moment, I think, reflects a couple of things. I think, one, it affects sort of a media hysteria around the U.S. China competition, and there's always an excuse to kind of like fire up an article about it. To me, I think our U.S. frontier builders have continued to do an exceptional job over this year and are creating amazing models. But I think my general take on all this kind of goes back to answering the core question of the AI action plan. And the action plan was winning the AI race was the title of it. And the question I always get is, what do you mean by winning the AI race? And In my interpretation of that, what we're trying to accomplish is we want to have adoption of American AI models. That is how we win. And adoption isn't necessarily synonymous with best frontier model. So you can have the very best model in the world, but if no one is using it, it doesn't matter. So for us, we spend a lot of time thinking about how we can ensure that our American models are deployed and adopted, not only in the US, but globally. And that is why that third pillar of our action plan, all about exporting American AI, is so critical. We want every country in the world to be using American chips, fine-tuning on American models, using American AI applications. And in doing so, you can create these amazing ecosystems where they rely on American technology and ultimately everyone benefits. So to me, I think my one take on the DeepSeek question is, I think it shows the promise and the excitement that these companies in China have for open source models. And it's something that they're going to continue to do. When you're in the sort of number 2 position, you're going to default to open source. And I think it presents a challenge to the United States in the sense that, we have to step up our open source game as well.
And a lot of the executives I'm talking to this week here at Davos are concerned about that deployment gap, right? They're talking about how powerful this technology is, but there is a gap in how people are using it today. What exactly are you doing to address that gap?
Well, I see it as an opportunity. If we're already here and we believe that we're only in the first or second inning of the deployment or the adoption of these frontier models for our greatest industries and broadly across industry, that's actually a good thing. That means we have a ton of runway to go and we have a lot more to do. And I think it only bodes well for the larger AI ecosystem if we're barely scratching the surface of these enterprise deployments.
And historically, a lot of developments in technology in the US have resulted from government research. And we've seen a lot of changes to government research under the Trump administration. Certainly massive firings under DOGE. You saw staff leave if they took the fork in the road. I mean, how are you thinking about changes at agencies like NIST and others that work on AI and what that means for our competitiveness?
Yeah, to me, I think these are sort of the core agencies that I work with every day are all the science and technology agencies in the U.S. government. As some of you may know, we spend about $150 billion a year on federally funded research and development. The U.S. is very unique in the sense that it doesn't have a sort of Ministry of AI or a Ministry of Technology or Science. Our science and technology spending is diffused across multiple agencies. So we have our national labs, Department of Energy, where you have about $9 billion in spend. You have a National Science Foundation with about $8 billion. You have DARPA at the Department of Defense. You have NIST and NOAA at the Department of Commerce. And I think what's so special about the U.S. ecosystem is that it is this sort of federated approach where you don't have sort of like one monolithic state-sponsored direction, but you can have individual agencies driving core competencies of S&T. And for us, and what I'm most proud of the way that we thought about spending in S&T and science and technology over the last year is that, we have right-sized the way that we think about the budget, but most importantly, we have preserved the budgets for the most important national priorities. So the president's budget prioritized AI and quantum, and the budget numbers for those years have remained constant. So for us, we want to be in a position where we're making the choices as an administration of what's most important for the country's future and making sure that we're preserving funding for them and spreading it across all our great agencies that do this work.
But just given the diffuse nature of how U.S. research works, I mean, what's your message to government scientists at universities who are really worried about these cuts and say it could hold the U.S. back?
Yeah, I think I would remind anyone in the U.S. science and tech community to sit back and reflect on what the S&T ecosystem looks like. I mentioned this statistic before, but I'll mention it again. In the U.S., we spend about $1 trillion on research and development. 70% of that is spent by the private sector, and the rest is spent by a combination of philanthropy and the federal government. What's key to remember, if you're trying to optimize the science and technology engine of the United States to get the best outcomes, get the most bang for your buck, drive the most innovation as quickly as possible, you need to look at that system holistically. And the challenge that often happens in the Beltway is people fixate on the small slice of the pie that is the federal government spending and don't realize how it fits within the larger ecosystem. So we spend a lot of time at our office trying to understand what are the places where the federal government can make an impact, given that the private sector is spending so much. Just look at these AI companies. There is no university under the sun, no matter how much money that the federal government gives them or grants them, could they ever build a data center to train a frontier model like you can in the private sector. So you have to think about places where the private sector has an important role to play and other places where federally funded research does.
And while we're on this topic of global competition, the only issue I'm hearing about more at Davos than AI is the administration's plans with Greenland. And I think a lot of people here are trying to make sense of why the US feels it needs Greenland. And one topic that comes up a lot is critical minerals. I mean, do you see Greenland as central to the future of AI dominance in the United States?
Well, this is a topic that's well out of my lane as a technology advisor to the president, but the president has been very clear that it's a national security imperative that that we control Greenland.
And obviously, here at Davos, we're seeing the biggest delegation that the US government has ever sent in history. And I'm just curious, it was a little surprising to me, given the America First rhetoric and the way that the president has at times run against some of the themes that define Davos. Why do you think the administration is making such a big investment in being here this week?
Well, I think as Secretary Besson said yesterday, just at the USA House, America first doesn't mean America alone. And I think what I believe and what my team is coming here to share is we have an amazing story to share about economic growth in the United States. Sadly, if you look across Europe and a lot of other parts of the developed world, they are nowhere near the growth numbers the United States has. It's a real struggle. If you look at energy prices across places like the UK and places like Germany, these are really bad. These are bad numbers. And if you believe that an AI technologically driven future is dependent on having reliable, cheap energy that can drive these data centers, you're in a world of hurt if you're in Europe. And I think we have a real story to tell about how to do it right. If you want to have the most innovative, vibrant, technologically forward economy in the world, it's not a secret how to do it. It's not a secret. The U.S. has been doing it for decades. This has been A/B tested for 2 decades now. There's something going on one side of the Atlantic and stuff going on the other. And we know what's working, we know what's not. So I think it's an opportunity for us to be able to share the lessons we have learned and how you can have the most vibrant technology ecosystem in the world. And we're excited to share that message. We want to share the benefits that our American people are reaping every day with the rest of the world. And I think we have an amazing story to share.
And on that point, you've been critical of the approach that the EU has taken to regulating artificial intelligence. Will you be meeting with any of your European counterparts while you're here in Davos this week?
I'll be meeting with a variety of counterparts from kind of all over the world. I think this is a great forum to be able to connect with both business leaders and technologists and policymakers on these important topics.
You can't tease anything about those meetings for us today?
Not at the moment, but thank you.
Okay. And, obviously all eyes are on President Trump's speech tomorrow here at Davos. Can we expect any AI news?
I will. I never want to get ahead of the president, so I urge all of you to tune in tomorrow afternoon.
Well, we'll definitely be tuning in. I can tell you that. And I just, in closing, wanted to ask you, we've focused so much on AI today. Obviously, that's just one part of a very large portfolio that you have. What is the other technology you're spending the most time on at the moment?
Yeah, so there's there's a letter that the president wrote me after it was confirmed that kind of laid out kind of a tasking to me on what we should accomplish as an office. And the 3 technologies that he laid out in that letter were AI, quantum, and nuclear energy. And we've done an incredible amount of work on sort of revitalizing civil nuclear in the United States and bringing back a nuclear renaissance. An incredible amount of work on driving quantum. If you think about where AI was in Trump 45 is kind of where quantum is sort of in Trump 47. So I think there's very important, critical, federally funded research that can be done to sort of drive the quantum edge forward. And I think the last piece, which I'm very excited about, is space. So our new administrator for NASA was confirmed in December. We have a lot we have to accomplish. Artemis 2 is going to be launching next month, where we're going to be sending astronauts to orbit the moon. We're going to put American boots back on the moon in 2028. We're going to have the first pieces of a lunar base on the moon by 2030. We're going to be having nuclear reactors on the moon and in orbit. So we have a lot we have to accomplish in the next 4 years, and we want to continue this dominance in space as well.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time, so we're going to have to leave it there. Michael, thank you so much for joining us today at WP Studio.
Thanks so much for having me.